let's talk about some best practices that will help improve the calls to action on your website and keep people engaged in exploring what you have to offer. Calls to action are also called CTAs, so if I say that, you'll know what I'm talking about. You want to be sure you have one on every single page of your website. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a button. It could just be a link at the bottom of a text passage. It could be a few words that are linked. It could be a little box that has some related content in it. Or it could be a button that says apply now or get help now or whatever it happens to be. Let's look at a few examples in context so I can talk through some more best practices around calls to action. So here's a great example of a beautiful website. Look at this lovely bird and baby bird. I'm very impressed with the imagery on this website. Unfortunately, the call to action is actually off the page. It's down here. So I've got this great information here, but the call to action has been pushed off the screen on my laptop. What I would probably do instead would just encourage the organization to remove one of these sentences, just somehow keep it tighter so that take action button is up top so that nobody misses it. Because right now I have what we call a false bottom where I don't necessarily even know that there's content below. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure our button is up high and that we can see it on mobile up high as well. So we want to be above the fold as much as possible for our calls to action, especially on main pages. When you're doing something like an article, it makes sense that the call to action would be farther on down. Another thing to mention is that this button could stand out a little bit more. Using one of the colors of the buttons up here might be a better choice to really make it catch the attention of the viewer. Let's look at another example. This is from the University of Oregon about Black History Month, and they've got this interesting button called Celebrate and Recognize. So the great thing is that it's front and center. It's pretty unmissable in many ways. I kind of wish it were yellow from the get-go and not only when I scrolled over it, but I think it will definitely attract clicks. Notice that these people are only using one call to action at a time, and that makes sense. Keeping it simple, giving people the thing you want them to do, not 4 different choices, typically turns out better and does encourage more clicks. It helps if your button can be a little bit more descriptive about what I'm going to click on. When I click on Celebrate and Recognize, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to go, and I bet it's somewhere great, but I don't necessarily know that. So ideally, our buttons are going to have good information sent, which is kind of that idea that I have a sense of where I'm going to get if I click on it. Looking at, this is the Australian Cricketers Association, and I totally want them to have a bigger logo so I can really read that without any problem whatsoever. But I want to give them a high five because they have a very clear call to action here. This looks like a news story. It's very clear that if I click on this, I will be reading more. So good information sent. I'll be reading more about these cricket awards, it looks like. So that is helpful. That is descriptive. Often in our buttons, it would be great if we could put something like read more about blah, 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 but sometimes the button space doesn't allow for that, and I understand it. So sometimes your buttons have to just be really short and sweet, like read more, learn more, that sort of thing. And if so, you just want to make sure they're very closely associated with the item. So it's very clear like what somebody would be reading more about. Here's an example from, this is an organization in Britain that I think is a tennis organization. And here they have an article about tennis at home and coaching. And so if I scroll down to the bottom of the article, there's lots of things to engage with in the article, which is great. It even has a little bit of a quiz on it, which is cool. And at the bottom there is their CTA, where they're really encouraging people to keep up with them. Great job, tennis people in London. You've done a good job with your CTA. So I want you to think about your own website and think about, do you have a call to action on every page? Do they pop out either as buttons or links? Are they descriptive so people know kind of where they're going to land after clicking on that thing? And are you making sure they're just really up high on mobile as well as desktop, laptop? Keep those things in mind. You're more likely to get the clicks that you want to help your organization and those who are visiting your site.